Welcome to ReSounding, a podcast exploring the power of the arts in advocacy and in action. We talk with artists and activists, taking a deep dive into questions surrounding the causes of displacement, the strength and the vulnerability of people on the move, and the potential of the arts to shine a light on social injustice and impact people's lives for the better. My name is Laura Hassler, and this month I spoke to Ruth Daniel, CEO of In Place of War. In Place of War is a global organization that encompasses music, theater, and visual art. With their planet-wide network of artists and creatives, they use art in all its forms to foster connection, equity, and social change. So, welcome, Ruth Daniel, to our latest podcast of ReSounding.
Thank you so much for inviting me along. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here.
So this is for me. I've hosted a number of our R27 podcasts, but today it almost feels like I can sort of wear two hats because I'm involved in R27, of course, with a great deal of love and passion, but I'm also director of Musicians Without Borders. And looking at your website of In Place of War, it looks to me like there are so many interlocking values in any case, areas of interest, ways of using creativity. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself first and how you got into or founded this organization? You founded it, correct?
I didn't found it. I was involved from the very beginning though. So I was involved in sort of that shaping of the organization. Yeah.
So how did that happen and what was before that for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I started my life as a musician from a very young age. I was a guitar player and I played in a number of bands based in Manchester in the UK. And I guess being based in Manchester, I really recognised that the epicenter of music industry activity was in London, and I felt very strongly that we should be better represented. So I started a record label when I was 20 years old. Mainly releasing music from the northwest of England, and just really a big fan of kind of the grassroots DIY, punk kind of ethos of just making things happen for yourself. And then the music industry went digital, and there was all of a sudden this big scramble. The major record labels didn't really know what to do. And I was just thinking all the time that the most amazing things were happening at the grassroots and independent level. And so I, with a collective of other people, started an alternative music industry festival called Unconvention, which was all about kind of breaking down the barriers, demystifying the music industry, and opening it up so that anybody could participate, regardless of background, regardless of, where their geography. And we started and made this event in a church in Salford in the UK. And it was attended by people from across the whole of the country. And it felt like there was this real desire to make a change and break the status quo. And so we took that event to over 35 countries. And I think to date, there have been almost 120 editions. Mm-hmm. And this was the moment where things changed for me. My life changed because one of the events that we made was in a place called Medellin in Colombia. And we took it we worked with the gang-affected communities who were using hip-hop as a mechanism to kind of have an alternative path. And this guy said to me, if it wasn't for hip-hop, I'd be dead. And I just thought, wow, that's so powerful. And then that sentiment started to be echoed everywhere that I went. People were saying how much music was saving their lives and changing their lives, especially in some of the more challenging contexts in the world. And at the same time, I met a professor at the University of Manchester, James Thompson, and he had started a research project called In Place of War. Mm-hmm. And the research project was to investigate why people make art. Do people make art when bombs are dropping on their heads? And if they do, why is art so powerful that in the most challenging times that we face as human beings, we're still either making it or we're looking to art for an answer or for a way to express ourselves? And I just thought, oh, that sounds amazing. And so we did this research project for a number of years looking at theatre and the role of theatre in conflict zones. And then I guess after a while, understanding how we could be useful to the people we were connecting with, the idea of In Place of War combined then music and other art forms. And we spun out of the university and became a charity serving the change maker communities that we have encountered through the work in the past.
What a fabulous story. That's amazing. I hear some parallels with my own life, although very different. I'm obviously also much older than you are, but I also played guitar and I played piano and clarinet, and I was always trying to get people to sing together from, being a kid on, leading the singing in the bus, and then became a folk singer and an anti-war protest singer. And
amazing.
Yeah. And then years go by, and suddenly, I was living in the Netherlands. I'm originally from New York, and singing music from all different cultures. And then the wars in the Balkans started, and suddenly the connection between the music and what's actually going on in the world, which I hear a different way, a different route for you, but there's something similar. And then suddenly something landed also. And we started reaching out to musicians in the Balkans and to human rights workers and peace workers and saying, hey, could we understand how powerful music can be? We're sure you do too. Is there any way we could work together? So
yeah,
it's different, but there's a kind of line of consciousness that follows through. And I love your story about changing shifting the paradigm basically of the music industry, of who gets to participate, and then this realization of what a life need arts are, and people who are most threatened in their lives, for them it becomes more intense in a different way.
I think that's it. And I think for me that those kind of principles continue through the work. So it's really about, connecting some of the most amazing artists who just don't have that opportunity to participate around the world because of the context that they're in, connecting them directly with the major music industry and, bridging that gap. And what we found, one of the things we've done in Place of War, is to create a global music industry advisory board, which is made up of 23 of the biggest music companies in the world. And we're frequently taking those organizations, to some of the communities that we work with so that they can share practice, they can provide equipment, they can spot talent and then work with that talent. And for us, it's about kind of, shining a spotlight on the brilliant dynamism that happens, in some of the places that we work. And I think for me also that thing about understanding the power of music to be able to make change is just something that's run through my entire life. And just, it's such a powerful tool. I love the fact that you were, making protest music, and that's it, isn't it? It's using music to galvanize people, to bring people together, to engage people. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Making protest music and getting arrested while doing it sometimes, it was, and then, but also just understanding something about what the courage that it gives you to make music with other people, the sense of what is essential, what is essentially human, the growth of empathy between people when they make music together. I think that those were life-changing for me always.
I've been having lots of conversations even today, and the number of times people say, there are no borders when it comes to music. It doesn't matter what language you make your music in, it can still translate across the world. And I think, that's so true. I remember seeing some rappers in Medellin in Colombia, and they were talking about their lives in their music, and I didn't understand so much Spanish, but I could feel everything that they were saying. You could feel the emotion, and it's that capacity for music to be able to convey emotion and connect people and make everybody feel that sense of togetherness that I think is just, it's magical, isn't it? It's truly magical.
And your called In Place of War, your stance against war, I would say, is that, can describe that or where that is from?
It's a difficult one because I think we aim to be as apolitical as we possibly can be, but we are absolutely anti-war. So I think, across the board, we want to live in a world where, and our tagline is, creativity conquers conflict, We that's what we're about. You know, a world where creativity thrives and there is not this war machine that is destroying our planet, you know, at a fast rate. And I think in terms of where we work, you know, often, you know, it's challenging in terms of active places of conflict. And I think I struggle with the term peace building, because I think, what does peace actually look like and what does that mean? And I think there is sometimes, and there is always room for healthy conflict, you know, for interrogating, for challenging, for changing the status quo. So I don't necessarily see ourselves as peace builders, but I see us as kind of providing what those people that we work with in communities around the world, what they want, what they need to create better opportunity and create places with less active conflict. So I sort of think that's our kind of stance.
Interesting. Well, we refer, besides the power of music, to two sort of guiding bodies of thought, and one is the principles of active nonviolence, which is, you know, based on Gandhian, Kingian, however you want to describe it, movements of peoples to combat violence and war, but meaning that the face of peace is justice. So it's not just no conflict. It's about standing with it's standing for justice as well. But part of it is do no harm. And the other body of principles are just simply the Human Rights Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is kind of the gold standard, the only one that there is, I think, at this point worldwide. And the idea that they should pertain to everyone. And one of the reasons that we do this consciously is because we are also aware of the fact that music can be used and has been also used to cause war or to promote violence. Yeah. So where do you refer back to if you're doing a music project? How do you, if you're involved in giving people tools so that they can write songs or whatever, that you're not providing sort of tools for writing songs that create enmity? Yeah. How do you do that?
Yeah. I love that though. I love your kind of principles there. I mean, I think that's it. I think that's very much reflected. Maybe we kind of frame it differently, but talk about it differently. But it is that absolutely do no harm and a kind of non-violent approach. Yeah, that's kind of echoed through the work that we do.
Yeah, great. No, I mean, it's it sort of, it shines through in everything that you write about. So that's why I thought, you know, we're really very close in many ways. So tell me something about a couple of your projects, and you already talked something about the ways in which the war industry is destroying the earth. I know that you're, like all of us, also looking for ways to engage with the question of climate change.
Yeah, this really big new initiative that happened completely accidentally, called ReSounding. So I think more and more the conversations that we're having with the people that we work with in conflict zones in the global south are talking more and more about climate change and how it's affecting them. It's become more and more into the everyday conversations that we're having with the amazing network of change makers that we work with. In the pandemic, we created this project, which is called Cucusonic. And it's basically, we were approached by some scientists and ex-combatants in the Colombian rainforest. And they were collecting the sounds of the biodiversity in the rainforest, the sounds of frogs and bats and birds. And they said they wanted to engage a wider public into understanding what the rainforest means and how we can all protect it. So we gave those sounds to some amazing artists, people like Brian Eno, people like Cold Cut, Matthew Deere, Mexican Institute of Sound, and they produced this beautiful album, taking those sounds and making them into pieces of music and connecting those sounds with audiences all over the world. and it was beautiful. And then sort of didn't forget about it, but kind of moved on to other things. And then I got a call from a guy called Lars, who's the president of the University of the Arctic. And he said, listen, I've heard about this amazing project in the Colombian rainforest. Can you do the same kind of thing, but for climate change? And he said, the biggest challenge that we face is that there's all this data and all this science, but people are not connecting with it. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to act. They don't know what to do for the best. He said, we need something that can reach people's hearts and minds. And I just thought, well, we can do something with music, and surely that might be an answer. So the next year I spent speaking to scientists, marine biologists, tropical disease specialists, all sorts of people involved in climate change, climate activists, and so on. And we created a project called ReSounding. And essentially, ReSounding is kind of a sort of movement of 3 parts, but it is a global project telling the story of climate change using music and working with Indigenous communities, musicians, cultural organisers, scientists, climate activists and experts. And it aims to distill this really big and complicated data to reach young people's hearts and minds, inspiring a clear call to action and unifying a movement. And this project will be about taking recordings of climate change and also species and sounds of the planet that we're losing because of climate change, and having musicians all over the world reworking those sounds into pieces of music. But it's also putting concerts, putting, artists on glaciers and in the Amazon and streaming these amazing concerts all around the world, keeping a really low carbon footprint, but again, showcasing the disappearing spaces that we're losing due to climate change. And all of it is about inspiring young people to change their behaviours, really simple steps that they can take to protect the planet. And it feels really powerful, and it feels like music can do this. Music has this capacity to kind of galvanise people and bring people together in this amazing way. And again, if this isn't a project that will just take place in the Arctic region, it will take place all over the world. And we're working with our network of change makers in conflict zones, everywhere from Uganda to South Africa and beyond, to participate in this, building this, sharing their stories, sharing their experiences of what's happening to them right now.
Interesting. We're also doing a pivot in the direction of understanding a relationship between some of our projects between the question of conflict, the question of climate, and music. And so, for example, in DRC Congo, we're exploring a project to understand how knowledge about the land and culture is carried by singing traditionally. Working with young musicians who have already been trained to work with children with very inclusive types of approaches, because there are hundreds of thousands of children in refugee camps who have nothing to do. The ways in which in many traditional cultures that knowledge about the land, if we're talking about preserving land, is communicated and held in a very different way from the kind of northern dominated scientific approach to climate change and environmental science. And then the connection to war and conflict, of course, which is also causing immense destruction of land everywhere.
Yeah.
And how do you bring these elements together, and understanding or respecting and trying to understand how this actually works within a culture, rather than importing climate science from afar.
Exactly, that's it. It's that localized knowledge. And especially for me, what I've been really interested in through this process is connecting with Indigenous communities and understanding their kind of principles and philosophies about how they protect their land. And for me, Indigenous communities hold all the knowledge. They've been protecting the land and working with the land forever. And I think there's so much that we can learn from them in the other parts of the world. So for me, that sounds like an amazing project. I'd love to find out more. But I think that's it. I think it's about kind of sharing those stories and putting Indigenous voices front and center of the conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that's it. I think climate will affect those communities that we're both working in, due to kind of, food supply and scarcity and migration of billions of people, which, play parts of the planet becoming completely unlivable. And that's going to happen rapidly.
Yeah.
And I think that will create more conflict. So it's this,
Exactly.
this challenge,
Exactly.
challenge
Yes.
of it's kind of, it just becomes this kind of almost self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. It's just going to get bigger and bigger, and the impact will reach parts of the planet, people who think they're quite comfortable now, but it's going to impact every single person, and it's going to happen very quickly. So I think I talk about it as having this window of hope. We've got this moment now where we can actually make the change, and I think using the tools that both you and I know are so powerful, to use music as a tool to kind of really galvanize people and get people involved on this movement, I think is a chance that we have right now to manifest that.
Yes. And I was just thinking of this to ask you to talk a little bit about how music does that, because I think so many people who are aware of the threats of climate disaster, and they are multiple, and they are interlocked with all of the other disasters that we're talking about. And what is the special place of music in empowering people to get out of a sense of despair and helplessness in maybe ways that you were saying, people don't, as with your climate project, people don't respond to these enormous threats in an empowered way. How do you see that?
I think there's three things that it does, and I think they're three of the most important things to being a human. One of them is about community. So music helps to build community. It helps to bring people together, and it helps to provide a space where, music is maybe the reason that you're in the room, or you're in the festival, or you're at the concert, but it actually provides a space where you can have the other conversations and you feel a sense of togetherness, because the music is bringing you together. I'm sure both of us have been at concerts before where you're dancing, or you're looking at the crowd, and it's like you're acting as one. And I think that's a really powerful thing. I think the second thing it does is about emotion. Music can share a story, can take you on a journey, and can reach parts of you that looking at a copy of, data from an academic journal is not gonna, music can make you see it for the human story, the emotive story that the data can't really do. And then I think it's about participation. Music is one of those things that opens up a way in which you can be part of something. You can actively participate. It's not like you're passive, you're in it, you're feeling it, you're meeting people, you're sharing this thing. So I think all of that combined, I think music for me can be, I have this thing where I love music so much. I think if someone said to me, what is the one thing that humans did the best? It's music, from nature to humans, the music that we have created, and that sense of what it can do. But I think, I'll be at a concert and someone will play a song and I'll just burst into tears, or I'll get goosebumps. It just does something to me that's like power. It's magical. I don't get that, just sat at my computer working every day. And I think that's it. And I think it's that thing where this guy called Laurent Garnier, he's a big electronic musician from France, and he said the dance floor, as in a club, a dance floor is a space for political change. And I think, you think everyone's there and they're just dancing to electronic music, but actually those people will become friends and will become a community. And the reason they're there and they're involved in something different, and I think that provides a space for so much change to happen. And so, that's, I believe it is the key. Yeah. The key to change.
Maybe even, I've heard some neuroscientists talk about how there are theories that people sang before they talked, before we, in the evolution of human beings, that music actually came first. And if you think about sort of the first sounds that a newborn baby hears, it's often the kind of singing of the mother or the father, and even if it's not technically singing, you still use this way.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Peter Gabriel, we did an event recently and Peter Gabriel came and he spoke and he said this thing. And then it was echoed today in a conversation I had earlier about the womb, being in the womb. One of the first things you're going to hear is your mother's heartbeat,
Yes.
this sound, this sonic sound passing
Yes.
through the body. And I think this idea of when you're in the womb, I don't know, my parents played music to me when I was in the womb. And like you say, this idea of your parents singing and, so I think music is there, whether it's a beat, whether it's a heartbeat, whether it's your mother singing, it's kind of the first sounds that you hear when you enter the world and before.
It's your heartbeat, it's your walking gait, it's your coordination, it's the sound of your voice, it's all of these things. And we've worked in some places where you discover that children who have been through traumatic events, for example, their bodily rhythms might be sort of dysregulated. And one of the ways that you can pull that back together is, for example, to do body percussion together. Even
right.
without any instruments or anything, because you're regulating that and you're doing it in a group. So you get the connection to the group, you get the kind of coming back to your own bodily rhythms. And that's at a very, very basic level. And there are so many stories. You have many of them. I have many of them, where the intensity of just being present at an emotionally honest musical event can touch people. You said it saved my life. I've heard women who had survived genocide and lost all their men, in a concert of saying this concert makes me want to live again.
Right. And it's hope, isn't it, as well? There's something about music that fills me with hope. It's just that sense of kind of, I don't know, just something really, really special, and that sense of kind of being part of it. I think, I can see how that's it. I can see how music kind of can reactivate your soul, when you've maybe been through an awful, terrible time. And I think we see that so many times. Music saved my life for a lot of hip hop artists in Colombia. I actually make a podcast separate to this that is called Music Saved My Life. And that was inspired by a famous techno DJ who said that it saved his life. And then I just thought that sentiment is being echoed so many times with the people that I speak to. Let's find out what that actually means. One person said as well, I was in Palestine and this girl said to me, but if we don't have music, if we don't have art, then what do we have? What's the point of living if we can't express ourselves? And I'm sure, a lot of people who maybe discredit the arts will still go out and they will still go to the cinema and they will still go and engage in these kind of activities, and I think it's part of us.
Could you give us like an impression of what things look like? How does your team work? Kind of overview of the sort of technical side of things?
Yeah, sure. So we've been around for 20 years. Next year is our 20th year anniversary. And we have been very small for a long time. And we're just about to double the size of our organizations. So it's still very small. However, the magic happens because we work with change maker organizations. The places that we work, we could never proclaim to know enough to just deliver work in a place, in a community in the north of Uganda. We don't live there. We don't speak the language. We don't, so we work with partner organizations, which we call our change maker organizations, 130 of those across 30 countries, primarily in Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And a lot of those organizations are really small grassroots organizations doing amazing work. And we basically work in a bespoke way with each organization to say, what do you need? What can we do together? How can we build together? And it might be through one of our biggest projects, which is in a community in South Africa, the creation of a huge cultural centre right in the heart of a gang-affected community that's taken many years to build. and to bring to life. It might be in Colombia. We just recently helped to renovate a space on the top of a mountain in a gang affected community, but on a much smaller scale. Or it might be providing platforms for people with marginalized voices to share their stories using creativity to do that. Mm-hmm. We are a team in not just in a team all over the world as our core team. We have a board of trustees, and our UK charity, we have a US 501c3, which is very new, and we have an Irish entity as well, so that we can continue to do the work in Europe after Brexit. Mm-hmm. And we have an artist advisory board, which is made up of a really diverse selection of artists from all over the world, representing Indigenous artists, LGBTQI plus artists. We have a youth advisory board, because when I started in this job, I was 23, and now I'm not 23. So I'm not young anymore. So I felt like, okay, my voice isn't really relevant anymore. So I stepped back, and we've got a youth advisory board with some remarkable people based all over the world who really inform our youth-driven work.
Sorry to interrupt you, but is that mostly organized online, I take it, because your larger team is spread and your partners?
So we do, most of our meetings are online, but we do still believe the value of physical meetings. But we have to now, we're developing a climate policy within the organisation, which is really sort of interrogating the way in which we travel. And so I'm still a very big fan of physical meetings. I think it's really important, but we have to really justify doing that now. So we do a lot of things online, but we try to meet once a year in one place with our core team and some of our change makers. And through the year, we're often able to mobilize people. So there's a continued kind of coming together of people. But we also have things like a WhatsApp group with everybody on it. So we're always sharing opportunities, news, etc. And then we work with the music industry very closely. So we have a network of big music companies that support what we do. So, for example, we have 5 of the biggest music equipment companies in the world, and they provide us with equipment. They give us a budget, and they let us choose what we want. And we have a process through which our organisations on the ground can apply, and then we furnish them with equipment that they need. So even though we're quite small, I feel like we're the right size. I like the size we are. It feels really manageable.
Amazing. Yeah. Wonderful. And how is it for you to be the director or the CEO of such a, what does that feel like for you? I'm curious, because you've been in it for a while, and you're overseeing the whole thing and speaking very beautifully about it. How is that for you?
It feels, it's weird. I never thought that this would be my job ever. I thought I didn't really know what I'd do, but I knew I wanted to do something, and I knew I wanted to be involved in something that was making change. And so I just, having this conversation, even though there's lots of things we haven't talked about, but that have been flashing through my mind as we've been talking. And it makes me actually feel really emotional. It makes me feel so lucky. I think I'm just really lucky to have this job. And I'm so lucky to work with the amazing people that I get to work with, who really are just the most intelligent, driven, catalyst for change. It's everything you could want in people. I get to work with those people every day, all over the world. And I think, through the work, I've seen some of the most remarkable things. That thing we talked about, where you'll be under the stars in a car park in Venezuela, in Caracas, and a group of guys are doing hip hop and break dancing, and that they're doing that, and they're not somewhere else, being involved in kind of violent activity, and what that means to them, and what it means just in the world, that's the tool that they have, is this kind of art form. It's really powerful, and I just feel really lucky. I feel really lucky to have been able to accidentally, for most of my life, be involved in this somehow.
I share that completely. and working with something that gives people a way of stepping out of the victim role.
Yeah, totally.
Because the blankets are necessary, the food is necessary, the tents are necessary, et cetera, whatever it is, the economic opportunities. But making music is a way of reclaiming your complete identity, which is what people often lose when they're in war zones or other types of hardship is you become only that which you have experienced in adversity instead of being a full human being. And I think this is what we've seen over and over again, is that the ways that making music, especially making music in a community context, you use that word community several times as well, the connection that it brings, the meaning that it brings, the lifting things above that which divides us, that quality of music, I think is, I really believe, it's one of the only tools we have to save the world.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. I think that's it. I completely agree. And I think, in a world that kind of, has this war machine, that we're seeing right now, we're seeing it manifest in front of our eyes. And we're watching, and everybody wants it to stop. But most people want it to stop, but we feel powerless, I guess. There's this sense of despair, I guess, on the one hand. And then there's a sense of kind of the unification that music can bring, that helps people, helps people gather together and understand what they can do and participate in that way. I don't know. I think for me, music equals hope, and and that brings about hope, and that's what's necessary to make change.
Are there things you want to point people to? How can they get involved? How can they follow you?
We have a whole bunch of the usuals. We have the socials, and we have, if you Google, our website is inplaceofwar.net, and I think you can find everything. There's a lot on there, believe me. But also there's a lot of links to our Facebook and Twitter and all of the other platforms. And also just to say, we're really open to people wanting to participate and be involved in what we do. We'll respond to every email we get. So if anybody wants to reach out and be involved in some way, we can always explore that with people. It's really nice to receive emails from people around the world who, want to bring a skill set, and they just want to, get involved and support what we're doing. So again, please do reach out and get in touch.
Beautiful. And I think, we've discovered a strong potential bond, and I hope we can develop that as well.
It's been so nice to meet you after all this time of being a fan of the work that you guys do. So I hope we can stay in touch and maybe work together even at some point in the future.
Let's try to do that for sure. Thank you so much, Ruth Daniel. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
ReSounding is brought to you by the Art27 Network, a network of like-minded initiatives using art and culture to respond to the ongoing crisis of displacement of human beings in Europe and around the world. To find out more and to join our growing network, you can visit our website, art27.art, or follow us on Facebook at art27. This podcast was produced and edited by Ed Holland. The theme tune was written by Matteo Gillespie in collaboration with Simko. Thank you for listening.